All right, thanks, Megan. I am joined with Greg Remmenga. It's time for some of that legal advice. What we're talking about today, after the accident, that trip to the doctor's office, and what you have to tell them.
Well, one of the main things you have to tell them and make sure the doctor writes it down is where you're hurting and how you're hurting so that the doctor can treat those, and later we can use that medical record to say, on the day of the accident, you said your shoulder was hurting. See, it's in the medical records. A lot of times people say that they've talked to the doctor about all their injuries, but when we look at the medical records, those injuries aren't listed in the medical records. So I want people to be sure to list them and make sure the doctor is writing down all the injuries. And a lot of times it's as simple as the forms that you fill out when you're doing the intake have check marks and everything else that you can say, this is where I'm hurting.
Now, when you do talk to the doctor, how important is it that you talk about your injuries in a true light instead of trying to over-magnify them or make something more out of less?
Well, that's a big problem because, first of all, the doctor doesn't know how to treat you if you're not being honest with the doctor. Then it becomes a problem for me as the attorney because the other side will say, you weren't really hurt, you're over-magnifying things, and if you're over-magnifying too much, they believe that you're lying about everything. So it's real important to keep track of what your injuries are and report those honestly. A lot of people don't know it, but doctors do tests to determine whether you're being honest about it. If you say you have a low back injuries, there's a series of tests that they have you do that when you do these maneuvers really don't affect your low back. But if you grimace and show pain saying you have a low back injury while you're doing these maneuvers, they know that you're probably faking it because those maneuvers shouldn't be hurting your back.
Now, when you talk to the doctors, how can you help them try and determine which injuries were caused from the accident and which are maybe lingering injuries, if you have a bad knee or something like that?
Well, once again, the big issue is you have to be honest with them and tell them everything that's hurting, and then let the doctor determine if it is from the lingering injury or it's a new injury. And the only way the doctor's going to know that is if you're honest, open, and help the doctor to try to get you better.
All right, Greg, thanks so much for all the advice. So for those of you at home, if you've got any legal questions, give Greg a call, 263-GREG. His address to his office is right there on your screen. Greg, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Stick around, everyone. I'll be right back with your full weather forecast right after this.
If you want Greg to answer one of your legal questions, visit krextv.com, click on Live in the Studio, and submit your question on the right side of the screen. Watch Greg's segment every Wednesday on News Channel 5 at noon.